Hi, I'm Chuck Olenek. I'm a reenactor. And that means I tend to wear clothes not from this time period and try to bring the past to life. And I did that for 36 years in the classroom, dressing the part for whatever time period and culture we were covering, and trying to breathe life into a subject that my students considered as dead as the people we were studying. And to that end, I would have a now playing board up in the classroom and the soundtrack for the time period. So whatever music fit with the time period and culture, that was playing in the background. And I would bring in realia or manipulatives, that's fancy teacher talk for artifacts, or actually just stuff that kids could touch to make it a kid-friendly museum. Well, I'm not in the classroom anymore. I'm repurposing myself. And I have at the house an entire room filled with garb. So I've got to use that stuff. I have a passion for bringing the past to life. That's what got me into teaching history, and that's also why I'm involved in historical reenactment. And I have a desire to preserve landmarks because they go away. I like to play amateur archaeologist and amateur anthropologist and history detective. So I'm now on a very pretentious sounding Mission Odyssey, where I intend to visit each of the sites associated with the missions in Alta California. That would be the missions themselves, and the asistencias, the spin-off missions, and the estancias, those are the ranchos designed to support the missions, and the presidios, those would be the fortifications designed to protect Spanish interests and later Mexican interests, and pretty much anything that would be 18th or 19th century sites in Alta California. So I don't just stick with the mission period, and also any Native American sites that happen to catch my fancy and that I can learn something about, hence the anthropology part. So what I'm doing now is I'm on my fourth round of going to Mission San Miguel Arcángel because I need to tell the story of the secularization of the mission. Also in the previous episode, I covered the boundaries of the mission lands and how these lands were put to use. Now, secularization, which means dividing up mission lands into ranchos that are going to have private owners. And I hope you stick with me on this journey. Well, since this is about secularization, we may as well deal with the beginnings of it. The idea of the missions in the minds of the Spanish government and later the Mexican government was that they would bring the neophytes into the Spanish or Mexican culture and their way of life, and eventually the missions would cease to be of use, and that the lands that the missions held would be they were being held in trust for the neophytes, who would be given their own lands and they would develop their own ranchos, which didn't happen. But in 1831, steps were being taken for that to take place at Mission San Miguel, but they were largely ignored. In 1831, in anticipation of secularization, the Indians at the mission were given their freedom. Juan Bautista Valentin Alvarado y Vallejo, or Juan Bautista Alvarado, was appointed as a commissioner by Jose Maria de Echeandia to oversee the turnover of Mission San Miguel, even though Echeandia was no longer governor. Alvarado came to the mission and made speeches to the neophytes about their rights. They were, however, so satisfied that none left. The order to free the Indians was an illegal order, by the way. For 3 years, the decree was not enforced. The history of Mission San Miguel Arcángel isn't complete unless you talk about this building behind me. This is the Rios-Caledonia Adobe, and it was built by Petronilo Rios, who was a corporal of the guard over at Mission San Miguel. This was supposed to be the housing for the Major Domo. And Rios is going to be traveling back and forth between San Miguel, Monterey, and San Francisco. He's going to serve for a while up in San Francisco as being in charge of artillery, and later he gets sent to the Presidio at Monterey, and I believe that's where he was promoted to sergeant, and he was in charge of an 8-man detachment of artillery for the Presidio. And understand, this building was built for the Major Domo of the mission, and yet secularization is looming on the horizon. When Alvarado became governor, he embraced secularization and sped up the process of granting former mission lands as ranchos. It required the grantee, the one petitioning for the land grant, to submit a letter of request accompanied by a diseño de terreno, or a design of the land, a rough map of the proposed rancho. Most just called it a diseño. On July 14th, 1836, Ignacio Coronel became the civil administrator for what was Mission San Miguel, because we're dealing with the secularization, and he and his wife, Francisca Romero, they moved into the Rios Adobe across the road, and with their 5 kids. And within a year, Coronel was replaced by a man named Inocente Garcia. But the secularization would be continuing. In that same year, 1837, the then 27-year-old Governor Juan Bautista Alvarado created 25 ranchos. The very first one was right here. This is the homestead of Ignacio Palomares, and the rancho was San Jose in the Pomona Valley. And over the next 2 years, he's going to create another 41 ranchos, giving them to Californios of standing. And then he'll take a break, and Manuel Casarin will act as the governor for a little less than a year, create 11 more ranchos, and then when Alvarado returns, he's going to create another 23 ranchos, only this time he's now going to start getting to the lands that had belonged to Mission San Miguel. The former estancia of Mission San Miguel San Simeon was secularized and divided into 3 distinct ranches: Piedra Blanca, Santa Rosa, and San Simeon. Rancho San Simeon extended along the Pacific coast from Rancho Piedra Blanca at Pico Creek, south along the coast to San Simeon Creek, and includes the present-day town site of San Simeon Acres. That was given to Jose Ramon Estrada, administrator of Mission Santa Clara, kind of keeping it in the good old boy system. His brother Julian Estrada was granted Rancho Santa Rosa, which extended along the coast from San Simeon Creek on the north to the present-day town of Harmony on the south, and encompassed present-day Cambria. Rancho Piedra Blanca, extending south along the Pacific coast from below Big Sur, from Ragged Point to Pico Creek, formerly Arroyo del Pinal, were to join Rancho San Simeon was given to Jose de Jesus Pico, a member of the prominent California family. He was also appointed, by the way, administrator of Mission San Miguel to speed up the process of disposing of it. In 1840, Petronilo decided he'd had enough of military life. He musters out. He wants to become a landowner. He wants to become a ranchero. Padre Moreno found the mission so despoiled that he had to retire elsewhere to support himself. Padre Abella, the last Franciscan at San Miguel, died in July of 1841. With the exile of the Spanish Franciscans, the Salinans left Mission San Miguel for their ancestral homes throughout the Central Coast, leaving perhaps 30 at the mission. Padre Miguel Gomez of Mission San Luis Obispo took over responsibility for both that mission and San Miguel in 1842. On July 4th, 1846, Pio Pico, the last Mexican governor of Alta California, on the eve of the Mexican War, sold Mission San Miguel to 3 investors. Miguel Garcia, the former sailor William Reed, and the now ex-soldado Petronilo Rios. And Reed would take over one wing of the mission complex. He took over the convento part, where that would be living quarters for himself and his family, and where he established a store and a tavern. Rios took over the house he had built, which was supposed to be the quarters for the major domo. Now that's his. And I don't know what Miguel Garcia got. They bought all of this for the magnificent sum of $600. Mission San Miguel is the site for one of the biggest mass murders in 19th century California history. And it's going to take place this way. William Reed, who bought the mission grounds proper, except for the chapel and the Padres' quarters, he had made a residence in the convento for his family. He had set up a store, and he also had set up a tavern or saloon. And this is the gold rush. So you have immigrants flooding in, and everyone wants their piece of the golden dream, and you got people panning for gold, you got people digging for gold. Reed tried it for a while, and he stank at it, but he was getting gold. And the way he was getting it was he was using his store and his saloon. But he wouldn't accept any paper money. He thought that the Mexican paper money and the American paper money was worthless, so he only dealt in gold, and he bragged about it. Well, unfortunately, one night in December in 1848, he bragged to the wrong people. 6 men, 6 strangers, are in his saloon, and he's bragging about how much money he made off of a recent sale of sheep, and that he had this gold hidden in his place, and he had a whole bunch more gold. And his guests went, that's nice. And these were 6 very violent men with really violent pasts. One was an army deserter, one was a convict on the run for a murder he'd committed, a couple of sailors who had jumped ship who also had violent pasts that didn't play well with others. There was an Indian named John who also wasn't the nicest man in the world. And there was another guy who rounded out the group, and he also had similar issues. And these guys basically, that's nice. And they took off south towards San Marcos Creek. They doubled back. They murdered Reed. They murdered his wife, who was pregnant, and their son. And then they turned around and murdered the servants. And so basically 11 people are dead. And they murdered Reed before they could find out where the gold was. They didn't bother to ask him. So they ransacked the place, couldn't find the gold, took whatever valuable things they could, including Reed's pea coat from when he was a sailor, which he like really treasured, and they took off. And the next day, a postmaster comes by and sees all the dead bodies, and that must have impressed him, and he went running across the road to Petronilo Rios' Adobe and told Rios what had happened. And so he then took off to the Presidio in Monterey to report this crime, and Rios, thinking quickly, armed all the Indians that worked for him. Well, now the murderers are doubling back, and they're thinking, hey, let's rob that guy's place. And when they approached the Adobe, they noticed all the Indians who had weapons, and they say, okay, that's a bad plan. So they left. Well, now a posse gets formed. One of the murderers is killed during a shootout. One of them either fell off a cliff into the sea and drowned, or jumped off a cliff to meet his fate that way. The Indian John got away, so now there's 3 guys left. They get captured. They sign confessions, and they are found guilty because they signed confessions, and they are supposed to be executed by hanging, except that California was still under military law, so this got booted over to the military, and they sent a firing squad. And so those 3 met their fate. Now, here's the fun part. Lots of people talk about there are some real unsettled spirits around here. Reed and his family and the other victims and the murderers. And so there is talk from time to time of people feeling things or hearing things or seeing things. Okay, so everyone's right, I talked too much. Found too much stuff. So it looks like I'm going to make a 5th journey to Mission San Miguel Arcángel. I hope you stick with me.